I'll just jump on to my topic, that is approach to a geriatric osteoporotic fractures. I work at Indian Spinal Injury Center, New Delhi. So we all know that osteoporotic is a big problem in the world, and in the world, every 3 seconds we have one osteoporotic fracture. So most of the vertebral fractures, 70 to 90% of the fractures can be treated conservatively with rest, restricted activity, and pharmacotherapy and lifestyle modifications. Surgery is needed only in small subset of patients. How are they different? Osteoporotic vertebral fractures, about 1/3 of the conservatively treated fractures fail to heal. So these are the fractures which are tricky, and progressive collapse of this fractured vertebra causes neurological complications. That is where we need to intervene. Identifying the risk factors enables the surgeon or the physician to treat them more aggressively and follow them up more aggressively. So what happens? Actually, they develop kyphotic deformity, they develop neurological deficits, they develop chronic back pain. Why they do develop? Because vertebra collapses progressively. It develops pseudoarthrosis. Along with that, it develops instability. We can predict at the first visit of the patient over OPD. So these are 5 kind of basically fracture patterns which have been described. That in that, if you have these 3 kind of fractures, that is a swelled front type of fracture, or a bow-shaped type of fracture, or a projecting type of a fracture, that more often than normal, these kind of fractures will progressively collapse. So if you see these kind of fractures or this kind of a picture in the X-ray, you need to follow up these patients very carefully, because they will go on to develop kyphosis. Why they develop kyphosis? Because of the infarction of the anterior spinal artery. So there's another, how can we predict on the MRI? So we all see these kind of pictures, fluid plus air, only fluid and only air. So more than 50% of the height loss happens when there is air which is seen, or fluid plus air which is seen. So whenever you see a air in the fracture vertebra, it's going to collapse. And if you have only fluid, maybe adjacent level fractures happen. So then, when is the surgery indicated? Surgery is indicated for pain relief in these patients, to fix the fracture for instability, to prevent complications like neurological deficits, and improve the quality of life in these patients. So what are the options do we have? We have minimally invasive options like vertebroplasty and kyphoplasty, and n number of similar procedures like kyphoplasty. We can do a percutaneous pedicle screw fixation. We have open procedures like pedicle screw fixation. We can use hooks and cables because they are more superior as compared to pedicle screw in osteoporotic bone. And we might have to do osteotomies when it comes to kyphotic osteoporotic spine. This is an algorithm. If you don't have any neurological deficits, always the treatment is conservative treatment. If fracture heals, well and good. If it doesn't heal, if the canal compromise is less than 50%, you can do vertebroplasty or kyphoplasty. But then if the canal compromise is more than 50%, you have to do a mini open or a open fixation or a percutaneous fixation. If there is a neurological deficit to present with, so we have to actually differentiate these 2 kind of instabilities. One is intervertebral instability and intravertebral instability. Because if you do a vertebroplasty or a kyphoplasty when there is an intervertebral instability, you will fail in that surgery. So if there is an intervertebral instability, you need to fix them up. Intravertebral instability, if the kyphosis is less than 30 degrees, again you can do vertebroplasty with fixation or without fixation. If it is more than 30 degrees, you need to do a kyphotic deformity correction. So let's go to one of the most common procedures we do, that is vertebroplasty or kyphoplasty. Subset of patient. After the advent of teriparatide, it has become lesser and lesser where we are doing these procedures. Where you have to select the patients very, very carefully. You have to see a high signal intensity on stir images on MRI, pain on percussion at the particular area, and increased activity if at all you do a bone scan. The most important controversy when it comes to vertebroplasty or kyphoplasty is timing, because this is a pain relieving procedure. So the dilemma is, because the best evidence that best results we obtain when we do it within 6 weeks, because you can achieve a better correction of the vertebral height. But then more than 80% of these fractures heal within 6 weeks. So we don't, there is a big ethical dilemma whether we have to intervene them before 6 weeks or after 6 weeks. So we have lots of options, but these are the four options which are marked in yellow are available in India, which we can. This is the major difference between vertebroplasty and kyphoplasty. Where in kyphoplasty we use balloon and inject cement in the low pressure environment, and in a vertebroplasty we don't use balloon, so we inject cement in a high pressure environment. That is, cement leakage in vertebroplasties are as high as 40%. But in this 40%, only 2 to 5% of them are significant, because the significant cement leakage is the one which happens into the epidural canal, that is posterior. So is the difference? Vertebroplasty is definitely cheaper and quicker. Kyphoplasty is expensive, takes longer time, but then restoration of the vertebral height done within 2 weeks or to 4 weeks is better. But then if you do it after 4 weeks, it's questionable. Less adjacent segment fractures, less cement leakage, and quality life increase. But again, there's a controversy in this. What are the recent developments? Calcium phosphate is being used in younger patients, and it is not as strong as PMMA, but it gets converted into bone eventually. So there are n number of, again, the different modalities are available. Stentoplasty, vesselplasty, you have this TACX procedure, and you have these IWEP pillars which can be introduced into vertebral body. You have this spine jack like a car jack, and then you have this osteoflex where you can do a unilateral kyphoplasties. So always kyphoplasties don't succeed. You can have the progressive collapse of the vertebral bodies, then you might have to do fixation in these fractures. So whenever you do these fixations, you have to consider the fragility of the bone, stability of the spine, and likely failure mechanism of any instrument which is applied to spine. So pedicle screws usually fail by toggling or loosening or eventually pulling out, and hooks pull out and wires cut out and anterior struts subside. So always do a preoperative diagnosis of the osteoporosis. If there is a time, increase the bone density. Intraoperatively maximize or enhance the anchor points. Postoperatively, always decrease the activity and do bracing. We can use screws, hooks, or wires or cables. A sublaminar hook constructs have better strength because it hooks onto the cortical bone, and you can use crosslinks, so it increases the torsional strength. One crosslink increases by 44%, and additional another crosslink increases it by another 26%. You can use these double-threaded screws where this part catches to the cortical bone, and this is a cancellous bone threads. And you have to see screws characteristics, again, insertional techniques and bone quality and augmentation. You can use all these techniques, larger screws, longer screws. So medialization of the screws increases actually the pull-out strength by around 28%. That's around 30% of the basically pull-out strength. And 80% penetration increases the strength by 20 to 30%. Purchase on the anterior cortex, which you have to do very carefully, it additionally increases your pull-out strength by another 16%. Additionally, you can use a cement augmentation of these screws, and it again increases your pull-out strength by 2 to 3 times. So in thoracic spine, it increases by 70%, and in lumbar spine, it increases by 120%. So this is an example. And you have another recent advance, like you have expandable screws, you have these Pentax. These can be introduced into these Pentax, and then you have these hydroxyapatite. You have these fenestrated screws for doing cement augmented pedicle screws. So this is a new technique which is called as cortical screws. The angle of this is totally different from pedicle screws. In pedicle screws, you go from medial to lateral. Here you go from medial to lateral and inferior to superior. But then by doing fixation, are we doing enough? No. It is found that only 22% of the osteoporotic fractures at surgically treated patients are treated for osteoporosis medically. in these patients, all we have to do DEXA, and then we have to try to calculate this Frax tool. So according to the Frax tool, if there is no fragility fracture, T-score is between 1 to minus 2.4, and 10-year probability of either hip fracture is less than 3%, or major osteoporotic fracture less than 20%, you need only 20 measures. But if there is a prior fragility fracture, but then T-score is less than minus 2.5, or T-score is between minus 1 and minus 2.4, and the 10-year probability of hip fracture is more than 3%, or major osteoporotic fracture is more than 20%, you need to treat them pharmacologically. So coming to the agents, you have bisphosphonates, denosumab, hormone replacement therapies, folic agents like teriparatide, abaloparatide, and romosozumab. So bisphosphonate, I have only one slide. That is, if at all your 10-year probability of having an osteoporotic fragility fracture has to be at least 1% to treat these patients with basically bisphosphonates. The teriparatide is gold standard wherever you have fragility fractures, wherever you have severe osteoporotic fractures, because this is the only anabolic agents which is available right now. The combination therapy we all know. I will just come to the next slide. Teriparatide and denosumab can also be combined. So you see in this slide that combination therapy definitely yields better BMD values as compared to alone denosumab or teriparatide. So this slide is very important. Never ever combine two potent anti-resorptives like zoledronic acid or denosumab. It is strictly no-no. You can use zoledronic acid followed by denosumab. That is actually helpful to prevent withdrawal effects of the denosumab. And zoledronic acid plus teriparatide together, it gives a higher BMDs, and it makes your bone stronger early. So you can use them as a emergency drugs in combination. You can use denosumab plus teriparatide definitely, and zoledronic acid first and then teriparatide definitely yes. Again denosumab and followed by teriparatide definitely yes, because there is a transient dip in the BMD, but it is better. So first choice has to be teriparatide first and then followed by denosumab. Second choice is teriparatide first and zoledronic acid. That is the second best. We have these newer drugs, that is romosozumab, which is we actually have better BMD values as to teriparatide and bisphosphonate alone. And then the recent drug in the market, that is abaloparatide, which has been approved by FDA for treatment of osteoporosis in 2017, and this is going to be in Indian market soon. So basically, in summary, first line bisphosphonate is contraindicated if there is a renal failure or unable to tolerate GI. Consider denosumab as an alternative if bisphosphonate is contraindicated. If severe osteoporosis with fragility fracture or without fragility fracture, teriparatide is the drug of choice. Thank you.